And welcome back again. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander of Keeping It Honest. We don't just keep it real, we don't just keep it simple, we keep it honest. You have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly. It's parkerman, PARKERMAN, at gmail.com, parkerman 2011, sorry about that, at gmail.com. And if you'd like to leave a message, voice message, text, that number is 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. And we thank you for supporting our show. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Tell your friends, share it. Remember, we try to give you things with a Parker twist. Today is no exception. Recently, Ashley Merchant, and you know her as a person involved with the Nathan Wade Fannie Willis trial. She was on Megyn Kelly. And instead of me describing how she was, you're going to hear it in her words, also with my analyst in between. But she did this very first exclusive on Megyn Kelly, and then she got on some other shows. But I kind of like the take that she did on Megyn. I saw part of it, but we're going to watch it together, and we're going to talk about it as we see it. She talks about the church speech. She talks about the ruling. She talks about what's going to happen next. If you're surprised, which I am, she's going to talk about what's going to happen next with the trial. Wow. So I want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about and watch Ashley Merchant on the Megyn Kelly show. And I'm telling you, once you see it, man, you're going to be amazed at what she talks about.
So is she always like this, making everything about race and getting personal on the defendants she prosecutes?
Yes, but I mean, she has been like that most of her career. I've got to say that this did surprise me. She's known me for 20 years. She knows I'm not racist. She knows that I'm not all of those things. So it did surprise me that she had those personal attacks. When the church speech, Martin Luther King weekend came out, we have a family chat, as a lot of people do, I'm sure, a family chat where your kids are chatting, texting. And my 14-year-old daughter literally texted the family chat and said, this lady is on TV calling mom and dad racists. Like, does she know them? And that was the first thing, the conversation in our family. We're the last people that you would call racist. And so, I had a lot of community outreach from that. A lot of people from the community said, I can't believe that. That's not who you are. That's such a far stretch from the truth. So that was surprising. There's folks out there that maybe could be called racist, but we're not one of them. So that was really surprising, particularly since she knows me and she's known me for so long.
Mm-hmm. We have a little bit of those church remarks. Let's take a listen.
And remember, this is what they talked about in the trial that the Judge McAfee said about how some of it was tainted and what they were telling the public.
Why does Commissioner Thorne and so many others question my decision in a special counsel? I appointed 3 special counsel, as is my right to do, paid them all the same hourly rate. They only attacked one. First thing they say, oh, she gonna play the race card now. But no, God, isn't it them who's playing the race card when they only question one? Why are they so surprised that a diverse team that I assembled, your child, can accomplish extraordinary things? God, wasn't it them that attacked this lawyer of impeccable credentials? How come, God, the same black man I hired was acceptable when a Republican in another county hired him and paid him twice the rate? Oh, y'all ain't hearing me. Why is the white male Republican's judgment good enough, but the black female Democrats not?
And you know what, real quick, because let me break some of that down. There are some black Republicans too. So she used the Republican as far as a white thing and then mentioned the black man. But then technically we had found out that Wade wasn't getting paid the same money as the white people but he was getting paid more. And you're talking about all this in church?
So those are the remarks to which you were referring, impugning not only you, but your client too. I mean, that's what the judge really had a problem with. And this guy's freedom is potentially in her hands. And she's making it a personal beef with him about race because you filed a motion to disqualify her.
Right. There's so much there in that clip that you just played. There's so many different issues. The one that, when I first heard it, I said, well, she's lying. And you would think if you're going on a church pulpit that is going to be broadcast. I mean, this is essentially her first public remarks after my motion was filed, and she doesn't tell the truth. The third person on this case did not make the same rate as the others. And, that's the first thing that stuck out to me. I mean, facts matter, words matter, the truth matters, and that was patently false. So, especially since I was, called a liar so many times and things that I said was patently false. If I'm going to get on national TV and talk in a church to God, I'm going to make sure that I've got the facts right. And John Floyd, the third prosecutor on this case, is not paid the same rate as the others. Plus, the work is very different. And I've analyzed this. I've lived with this for almost 6 months. So I know these records like the back of my hand. You've got 3 different prosecutors billing very different amounts, doing very different work. Nathan Wade bills sitting there. So he's bills sitting in court watching John Floyd or Anna Cross do work.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, and they didn't talk about that too. So Nathan Wade, when he's watching the trial, as the other attorneys are doing their job, he gets paid just to sit there. Now, who gets paid to sit there? It's like I come to your job, I work with you, and then when I take my lunch break, I'm still getting paid.
They don't bill sitting watching him do work. So that was one big distinction. Second, they're not sleeping with her. So that's a big distinction. Third, they're not all being paid the same rate. And fourth, their qualifications are extremely different. I have known all 3 of them for the better part of 20 years. And so, race doesn't play into any of those factors. And so all of those things were left out of it. So that was the first takeaway I got from that church speech.
Mm-hmm.
I'm humbly asking every pro-Trump patriot watching this video to please chip in just $5 to my father's campaign before the end of month deadline. My dad's campaign is...
There are a lot of people watching this right now who
are watching this. This is people. We are watching the Megyn Kelly interview with Ashley Merchant, and she's talking about the Fannie Willis accusations, which she reacts to the ruling and what happens next.
feeling incensed. They see how political she is, how she tried to play the race card. We expect this to keep going as this prosecution keeps on. And they're feeling kind of bummed out, Ashley. I've heard from a lot of them since the judge's ruling. I'm sure you are too. But how do you see the import of what happened here? You finding this story, moving to disqualify, the evidentiary hearing, like where are we today versus January 1st before you'd filed any of this?
Before we filed this, none of this was known to the world. So there was a small group of us that knew this, but the world didn't know this. And so, there was a very different image of this prosecution and a very different image of the DA's office. And one of the things that Ms. Willis has always run on is transparency. And that is one of the guiding principles that I practice by is transparency. I'm very transparent, which is, I'm a defense lawyer, so I don't have to be transparent, but I am, and I believe in transparency. And so, bringing this to the public and bringing this to the court was very important to me. So if you look at where we were at the beginning of January, nobody knew when I filed this that they were actually having an affair and that he had taken her on all of these lavish vacations. When we filed the motion, everybody said, oh, well, she doesn't have proof. She didn't put proof in the motion, which is typical. And it was hard because the motion's pending, so I can't really speak publicly about it. But, that's how we file motions. Proof comes in the actual evidentiary hearing. So we have to allege enough to get an evidentiary hearing. And then we actually put the facts up. So, that was difficult. Then when she gave this church speech, I didn't know how she was going to respond. Is she going to admit to it? Is she going to deny it? Is she going to step aside? What's going to happen? But then she admitted to it. And so then it became an issue of when it started, which before I filed the motion, that wasn't even an issue. It's sort of like we switched the focus from all of the conduct to when it started. And I go back to the original motion. I don't know that it necessarily matters when it started. I still think that it reaches the standard of impropriety that requires her to disqualify. I don't know. I mean, we spent a lot of time fighting over when the actual affair started, but I've never thought that that was a big issue. I mean, definitely it's more damning if it started before she hired him, but they renewed the contracts 3 times. So, they were definitely undisputed in a relationship when she renewed these contracts, and the contracts kept getting for more and more money.
And that's interesting. So it really doesn't matter when the relationship started or that they were having a relationship while they were going after Trump.
I also think that if you hide things you're doing, that usually is an indication that they're not something you should be doing. And people hide things for different reasons, but when you're a public official and you know that your life is going to be scrutinized, you have to be extra cautious. I've never been a public official. I don't have a desire to be a public official, but if you are a public official, you've got to keep records of things. Why you would pay cash to a man that you are sleeping with, and you are also paying in what is undisputedly one of the largest criminal cases in our legal history, is beyond me. And so I think the public is right to question how this is allowed to go on.
But my thing is too, does that part really matter if she technically is paying him and then he uses his money to buy her things? Isn't this money that he's worked for?
It's absolutely reckless at a minimum. We know she did that. So why doesn't bouncing him off of the case cure it?
That was never what I imagined happening, because there is law in Georgia that says if one person in the case is bad, the whole case is bad. So, and we saw that with pre-indictment with Burt Jones, who is our lieutenant governor in Georgia, and Miss Willis and her whole office had a conflict. She had the conflict, but the judge in that case, a different judge, Judge McBurney, kicked the entire office. And the law that he followed said, if she's got a conflict, the whole office has a conflict. So in my opinion, that's what the law says. It says if Mr. Wade has a conflict, the whole office has a conflict. And I do think the judge in his order was telling her you should step aside.
But he didn't really take her off the case. And if that law goes for everything in Georgia, if the one person who's the lead is a conflict of interest, then everybody should go. Then why doesn't this apply in this case? And just to let you know, I'm not an attorney. I'm just sitting back like you, putting together the puzzle and the pieces. And if you look at Ashley Merchant, she doesn't want to be a politician, but you may see her having her own show or being a, a legal analyst. She just has that look about her, and she's totally in control. And she is milking it too as best as she can, but she seems honest in what she does.
But obviously that's not going to happen. He just wasn't willing to take that next step and say, you have to step aside. But I don't think that you could split the baby like this. I've never thought that you could split the baby. I thought it was all or nothing.
I know you're in a tough position because you now have a criminal case in front of Judge McAfee that you have to try, presumably all the way to conclusion. So he's your judge and you have to be respectful, and I get it. I've been there. However, what do you think his motivation was in ruling the way he did? Because we've had a lot of people, our audience, and we've had experts come on the show to say this was political. He's running for re-election. The district went 73% for Joe Biden, and there was no world in which this judge was going to get re-elected if he bounced Fani Willis off this case. What do you think?
I don't even have to answer that just to this judge. I can answer that to judges in general. If they have the choice of not deciding, that's what they do. And that just tends to be, what happens. If they can push it back on the parties to make the decision, that's commonly what happens. And I think that's what we saw here. We saw the safe play. We saw, okay, well, it's bad, but I'm putting it back on you to do. I'm putting it back on you, Miss Willis, to make the tough decision. Either you go, he goes, or I invite you both to go, is how I read the order, hoping that she would do the right thing.
And that's a very smart thing to do for him, because if he's looking to get elected, he's not really putting the responsibility on himself, where people will say, yeah, you did the wrong thing, or nay, you did the wrong thing. He's like, look, I'm leaving this up to you guys. I'm out.
And we see that a lot. We see that with judges a lot. That's the safest route to take, to split the baby. And that's very common. And it's, most of the time that is justice, to be able to, make the parties figure it out on their own. But as we've seen in this case, that's not going to happen. She, for some reason, very, very much wants to continue on this case, which is surprising. I can tell you in 20 years of practice, I've never once seen a DA who had a motion to disqualify not voluntarily disqualify, if there were any grounds. Never,
Wow.
Never. I've had it happen a couple of times, which is how I know the process, for another district attorney to be appointed. Anytime someone has said you've got a conflict and you need to be disqualified, the prosecutor's office is like, okay, bye. Like, because it's less work for them, and why be fighting that the entire prosecution? Why be?
But this is a big case. So who would want to get off a case where they could pretty much get known for prosecuting the president, ex-president of the United States?
Trying to
because she well, you answer the question, because to me it seems clear she wants to be a star. She's using this case to make herself a celebrity.
100%. Her office found, and this was one of the details that kind of got lost in the mix, because it didn't have a ton of relevancy to our motion, so we couldn't focus on it. But she used $10,000 of taxpayer money to hire a media monitoring company. It's called Critical Mention. That's that. When I saw that, it was, and the emails that are attached to it, they're clearly looking to put a dollar value on her publicity. And there's only one reason for that. She wants to do something further politically. That was just so obvious to me. And if I don't live in Fulton County, I live in an adjoining county, thank goodness, because if 10,000 of my tax dollars went to a district attorney paying to monitor her own media, I would be absolutely livid, particularly in Fulton County, where it is a third world country in that jail. It is awful. There's just so many problems in that county. And I used to live in Fulton
else?
County.
It's like there's a simple way of monitoring your media mentions, and you just put a Google alert on yourself. I don't recommend it. It's very depressing, but if she really wants to see the coverage of her name out there, she can do that. You don't need to spend taxpayer, $10,000 in order to find out what people are saying about you. She clearly is using it. And those comments that we just played just show it. She went to that women's event thing and got a heroine's welcome. And then they replayed, I'll show you on Friday after Judge McAfee's ruling, which allowed her to remain on the case. That same group put out this video celebrating her like she's the second coming. Here, let's watch some of it.
Well, these are some people that are happy.
It's just video, but in any event, you can see they're celebrating her. They're playing Beyonce. That look, Fulton County elected her, and I don't know. Is there? She keeps playing the race card, so I'll ask you whether it's relevant. Is it a racial thing? I imagine.
So this is interesting because she's going to have the African American vote unless she's going up against an African American opponent, which we're going to find out. But people love her as much as hate her.
Fulton County is predominantly minority. Is she trying to tap into some sort of racial grievance there by continuously bringing this up?
I think so. And I think it's important to look at the history of her office. She's a new prosecutor, but her first big case was the YSL case, which is it's a racketeering case against a rapper named Young Thug. That case is still pending. That case actually divided the community in Fulton County a lot, because she used rap lyrics and is still using rap lyrics and took the stance of using rap lyrics against those gentlemen who were charged in that case. And that was a very controversial decision in the Black community in Atlanta. And so I feel like part of this is her politically trying to regain that community that might have not been happy about what happened in the YSL case. So I definitely think it's political. And I think she's got higher political ambitions, which, surprised me. I knew her when I was a public defender and she was a line DA. It surprised me because how there's moments that you remember in your career where someone said something to you and it's sort of
kind of like she said, lion DA,
profound, and it sticks with you. I have one of those with her. This was probably 15 years ago. I was a young public defender. She was a young prosecutor, and I had filed a motion on a double jeopardy, and I won on appeal. and I was still kind of unsure of myself and, felt bad shaking things up. And she said, don't ever feel bad about defending your client, because if you don't defend your client and you don't do everything that you need to do, my convictions won't stand.
So Fanny is giving Ashley advice. They've known each other for a while.
And I can't do my job. And I said, that's a really good perspective. And I've always viewed it that way. So, being attacked, and these attacks have been personal, being attacked was sort of surprising to me, because all I'm doing is defending my client, and she knows me and knows that I'm not racially motivated, knows that I'm not, biased against women or anything like that. So it is kind of surprising.
And not biased against Nathan Wade. I mean, they pointed out in their opposition to your motion that you campaigned for him, I guess, when he was running for judge, but you had supported him. Obviously, if his race or status as a man were a problem for you, you wouldn't have done that. I didn't think that inured against you. I thought it was the opposite. But of course, she's enjoying trying to lead people to believe that, because it helps her. It's a low blow, and we've watched it. All right, I want to ask you some questions about the hearing, if you don't mind, because we all watched it. And
this is going to be an interesting part, because she was one that was asking the questions at the hearing.
Apparently, I only watch your hearing and your case from the Caribbean, because I was at a different vacation over President's Day. Yeah, actually, it's been a very nice turn for us this past couple of months. It was freezing in Connecticut. Anyway, there we sat in the Bahamas, and I listened to this whole thing, and I watched every minute of it. And I had a couple of quick key questions. I'm amazed that the judge completely dismissed Robin Yurty, who didn't want to be there. If I wanted to sink Fannie Willis because she forced me out of the DA's office, as Fannie alleged, I would have come running to your courtroom. I would have.
So this interesting part, Robert Uri was also a former friend of Fannie, and she did the testimony where she said, "Oh yeah, I saw them, her and Nathan hugging, kissing, holding hands, and they threw this out." That's what the judge did. Why is that?
Said, "Ms. Merchant, how can I help you? I can't wait to sink her. She's terrible." But you had to subpoena her. You pointed out she was terrified to get up there. When she actually was forced to testify, she was very laconic, very short answers. She was not volunteering anything. And I found her very credible. The judge said, I'm paraphrasing, but like it wasn't filled out. Like her testimony wasn't filled out. Right. I can understand that criticism, because I too wanted her to offer more detail. I wanted to hear like a narrative answer. Right. So what are your thoughts on him dismissing her testimony and how her testimony went?
I was surprised that he dismissed her, because I thought she was by far the most credible witness that took the stand. And I was disappointed, because I could have made it more flowery, gone into salacious details about what she had seen them with.
That's what we wanted.
Right. And it's crazy, because I was under attack for doing that. So, I'm getting right to the facts. I'm bringing a witness, and that's just kind of my style in court. I'm one of those people where I don't, and it's from trying jury cases. I try not to waste jurors' time, so I get to the meat of it, and then I get out. And that's just my style. But with Robin, she was very hesitant to come forward. She had a lawyer. I think all of this context is important. She had a lawyer who filed a motion to quash and relitigated that right before she testified. That lawyer, who is a very pleasant and wonderful person, is a Fannie Willis supporter. So, you've got someone, all of the lawyers that did these motions to quash, you see their names on her campaign flyers regularly.
So that's interesting. So it seems like lawyers have lawyers, and all the lawyers are connected with Fannie Willis, because remember, she's the top dog. So when you're trying to take down the top dog, you get all the lower dogs who they may employ, meaning the top dog. So you have the lower dogs trying to take down the top dogs. And politically, depending on what cities you're at, people tend to know each other, especially if it's a small unit. And Atlanta seems to be a small town where everybody knows everybody. And legal-wise, since Fannie was the top dog and still is, everybody knows her. So how many people are intimidated of trying to take down the top dog?
Literally. So, Robin Yurty hired a lawyer who is literally on Fannie Willis's campaign flyers as a supporter, trying to keep Robin Yurty off the stand. Robin didn't have a beef to come. She didn't want to be a part of it. She always said, "I'll tell the truth." But the other thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that hesitant witnesses will not talk to the defense out of court. So, my interactions with her were through her lawyer and, somewhat limited. So I don't have the ability when someone doesn't want to come and testify for me to get all of these flowery details. I got what I needed from her. And then she was unequivocal. There was no doubt in her mind, and she was her best friend. Yeah,
she said no doubt. Okay, he said it ultimately. In addition, while the testimony of Robin Yurti raised doubts about the state's assertions, it ultimately lacked context and detail. And then he went on to say, but even after considering the proffered cell phone testimony from defendant Trump, along with the entirety of the other evidence, neither side was able to conclusively establish by a preponderance of the evidence when the relationship evolved into a romantic one. That's just, with respect to the judge, that's the biggest lie in this opinion.
And that is interesting because they didn't want to use the cell phones. They thought that wasn't relevant to the case of cell phone records. But it's interesting, as they'll probably talk about, that in other cases that Fannie has done, and the DA's office, they have used cell phone records to win cases. But in Fannie's case, this was irrelevant.
That's the biggest lie that he wrote. That's just not true. Neither side was able to conclusively establish. And there's a little trick there. There's a trick, like a sleight of hand, conclusively established by a preponderance of the evidence. Which is it? That's almost holding you to two different standards there. The correct one is preponderance, 51% more likely than not. And he wants conclusive 51%. You absolutely got there. This is the only mention of Yurti or the cell phone records, which show him at her house overnight. So what was he doing there?
Right. And Yurti, there wasn't really any motive to lie. So she didn't work for the DA's office anymore. She has her own career. This wasn't like she'd been there 20 years and was fired. She had literally come on to work for her best friend to help her with media. And then they just had a disagreement and she was demoted. And so she left. It wasn't like this was this huge, blowout between them.
Everyone's saying disgruntled. The left-wing media you saw, disgruntled.
She wasn't disgruntled. She didn't look disgruntled. She didn't want to be there. But, a lot of that was she doesn't like my client and doesn't like our side, So she told me, she's like, I don't want to help you. And a lot of the witnesses were like that. A lot of them did not want to help me, did not want to help my side. And so, I have to talk to them and say, but the truth is the truth. You have to tell the truth. That's what you've got to do. And that's what I kept telling her, despite her not wanting to help my side. She said, I'll tell the truth.
And, it's kind of funny because it did seem like Robin Yurti didn't really want to be there, didn't really want to talk. And pretty much everybody up on the stand who Ashley was talking to didn't want to be there. So it wasn't like they were supporting, I guess, the prosecutors. They were supporting, in a way, Fannie and were, I guess, pushed to be on the stand.
That's amazing. I see your point that you did get hit and Fannie Willis hit you for, probing the details of her personal life. And yet here you decide discretion is the better part of valor. Like there's no reason to get into the really salacious details and it gets held against you. I wondered if in the moment, since she was a hostile witness to you, she was there under protest, sometimes as the lawyer, you're like, I've got my admission. I'm just going to move on because I actually don't know what I'm going to get if I push more. I don't want to screw up my record.
Right. That's true. And, there's a lot more that Robin Yurti wants to say that was not relevant to this case. And so I was trying very hard to not, it's ironic. I was trying very hard to not turn it into a circus because she's got different issues with Ms. Willis's office and her prosecution of other cases.
Isn't she a whistleblower and something else?
She has somewhat, she's not one of, as far as I know, she's not one of the named whistleblowers that's actually, testifying or anything like that. But she is to a certain extent. And, that stuff wasn't relevant to my case. And so I was trying very hard to just stay focused on the relevant issues in my case, which is why we didn't go into all the flowery details and things like that.
So Robin Yurti, she technically is involved with other situations from working with the former DA's office. But the judge is saying she didn't give enough. And Ashley saying we didn't want her to give too much. because she had a lot of things going on. Maybe she should have given too much, and then you guys separated from there.
Do you think at some point, Robin, your team might sit down with somebody, let's hope it's me, and actually just tell the story? I mean, there's nothing prohibiting her from telling the story other than what? The threat of Fani Willis or the threat of helping Trump?
I think Fani Willis is very powerful in the Atlanta area. And I think just from talking to a lot of witnesses, they did not want the scrutiny. They didn't want what happened to me to happen to them. They just don't want that. And as you see, it's very easy to charge someone in a criminal case, and I'm not commenting on this case in particular, but everybody knows, you can indict a ham sandwich. And so the person that you don't want to get in crosshairs with is arguably the highest ranking law enforcement officer as an attorney, in the state past the attorney general. I mean, Fulton County is the largest jurisdiction we have. So I think it's reasonable that people don't want to get in her crosshairs. And I think there's scary. A lot of that going on.
Yeah, that's scary. Well, of course, that's the perfect lead into Terrence Bradley. OMG. What? I mean, okay, let's start at the beginning. I didn't realize until the hearing that he was the tip-off to you on the fact that this affair began. The way I had read your motion filed, I think January 6th, was it led me to believe somehow that maybe it was Nathan Wade's ex-wife, Joycelyn, or her lawyer who maybe gave you the heads up. But it turns out it was Terrence Bradley, Nathan's former law partner. And we've seen from those full text messages between you and Terrence Bradley how helpful he wanted to be, how much he knew about the affair, how many leads he wanted you to follow. And then it was a 180 when he got on the stand. So tell us your experience with Terrence Bradley.
I'm still shocked when I look back at it, looking at him, but I could tell from his testimony, by his eyes and when he looked at me and said,
So before we get into that, now, was he the deciding factor on this case? Was Terrence Bradley the one that was, well, you know what? He put everything out there. He told us stories that we didn't know about. And was he the person that, before we had knew anything else about this Fani Willis, was he the person that, I guess, kind of brought everything to light? This part is going to be interesting because if you remember, Terrence was on the stand and he was sweating big time. And he acted like he really didn't know anything. But then when Ashley brought out the Texas, he couldn't do anything but just sweat a little bit more. Wow. So let's listen to this as far as her and how she dealt with Terrence.
I'm trying to save my law license. That was one of the only times he directly looked at me during his testimony. And I think that was him telling me, like, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to save my law license here. But it was disappointing because he came to me and he knew, my role in the case. He knew that I represented one of the defendants in this case. He knew I represented Mr. Roman. And so he came to me and initiated this contact. But I know Terrence, and I knew Terrence, and I very much like Terrence as a colleague, a professional colleague, and a friend. I am surprised. I'm still surprised because I thought that he would tell the truth on the stand. We had many conversations. Those texts are just sort of a small snippet of it, a timeline, but there's many conversations. And I went and I pulled back my phone records, I'm like, am I crazy? Did I dream up all these phone calls? And so I pulled out my phone records and I'm like, nope, it follows exactly my timeline of all the times we talked about it. And, I'm not the only person that he told about it. He told another lawyer in the case who represented Mr. Chesborough, told him about it and told some other folks, as we've seen from some subsequent filings, a district attorney in Cobb County told her about it. So, I was very surprised by the privilege argument because I had never heard that. I never heard that until Mr. Wade and his friend called a friend of Mr. Bradley's. That was the first time I'd heard the word privilege.
Just to clarify for the audience, meaning that when Terrence Bradley got on the stand, he claimed everything he knew about Nathan Wade's affair with Fani Willis was privileged. And meanwhile, he'd been talking, he was like the town crier about it prior to the moment he actually took the stand. So there
So he was talking to everybody about this affair before he got on the stand. And then we got on the stand, he clammed up. And some people say he might have been intimidated by somebody or threatened. What do you think?
There was a divergence there between his behavior and what he was claiming when he hit the stand. Keep going.
Right. And, not surprising, because if it's privileged, then you know about it, So he's saying, oh, well, I didn't know it's speculation. Oh, but it's privileged. It's like when the privilege didn't work, we switched over to speculation. Which is it? It's confusing. But the thing with this privilege term, where it first came about, was when Nathan Wade actually called Terrence's best friend and, said, hey, remind him about his privilege. And so that was the first time that this whole, oh, wait, it's privilege sort of came in. And I think that's when he had that threat almost that, hey, I'm coming after your law license.
So why would somebody tell Terrence that it's just a lot, isn't it? Not Bradley. But I want you to listen to what she's about to say. Then we're going to go from there.
And when Terrence took the stand and said, I'm trying to protect my law license, that told me everything I needed. At that point I said, okay, I've got to switch. And I think you could even see my demeanor switch at that point, from, hey, Terrence is my friend, to Terrence is someone who lied to me. And is
so, as she said, and it's kind of interesting, was Terrence her friend? Because after he said he didn't know nothing on the stand, she just went after him like she was and is an attorney. And was Terrence Bradley threatened inadvertently by Nathan Wade, because Nathan Wade talked to one of Terrence's friends and said, hey, don't forget to remind him about it being privileged. Now, is that a weird kind of threat? If they don't talk, then why would he talk to his friend to talk to Terrence? Interesting.
lying on the stand.
Right. It was clear. I mean, it was clear to everybody that he was lying on the stand, including the judge. The judge put absolutely no weight on his testimony. And so he got what he wanted. Nathan Wade got what he wanted, and getting him to shut up when it mattered. But the text messaging, I thought, was very damning, very damning. Why would he? I mean, he said absolutely that he knew when it had begun, that it had begun prior to when they had testified to on the stand, and that it had begun after she left the DA's office, as you point out, a line. I just want to line, not LYINDA, a line, LINEDA. She later, I would submit, became a lion DA, but in any event, so that was back in 19. So one of my audience members, I read their emails, Ashley, and one of them wanted me to ask you whether you wish in those text messages you had established the foundation for his personal knowledge, since that was what the judge said. He didn't see any foundation for it. Like, this could have been speculation by him. It could have just been like, yeah, I think they did. And we don't know how he knew or if he really knew at all.
So excuse me. That's interesting, because if you looked at the texts and she asked that they had a relationship, excuse me, she asked Terrence in the text and he said absolutely. Should she have said, was it before they started doing this Donald Trump case, or what year? And if he'd have replied in what year in the text, well, April 2019, then would that have been clarification? I think the judge was just picking.
Right. I wish I had, because I talked to him about that in person and on the phone. When I filed the response, the second, not the first filing, but then they responded and said, okay, we were in a relationship, but it didn't start until after he was hired. Then I called Terrence, literally sitting at my desk in the same office, and said, okay, this is what they filed. I need to respond. Let's talk about it. And that's when he told me about like the garage door opener and things like that. And he explained things with sensory details, like, I saw this and he told me about this. And that, those details I wish I had captured in text, but at the time I didn't know that I needed to, because I didn't think that Terrence would ever, clam up and claim this privilege theory. Going back, I wish I had gotten a lot more details, but I didn't know I needed
So he gave them to you in person. Like, do you, sitting here today, do you have any doubt that he knows as a fact, he knows that they did begin the affair prior to when they claimed?
No doubt. I have no doubt that I mean, he told me details. And, as lawyers, we learn to get sensory details. One of our jobs, it's like we become sort of a lie detector test almost, that we can tell when people have sensory details, when they don't, and he was just telling me certain details. And, part of what we do is we try to match up facts. So he's telling me things early on, telling me about the Yurdi apartment, for example. He's explaining it in detail. And then when I finally find Miss Yurdi and I confirm the apartment, I'm like, okay, well, Terrence was telling the truth. All of those details match up. The same thing with when they met. Terrence told me about when they met at this conference, and then I went and subpoenaed the records from the conference and verified that he was speaking at that conference and she was in attendance at that conference. So, all of those details matched up from what he told me, which led me to believe he was credible.
So it seems like Terrence, whether he liked it or not, was given Ashley a lot of information and given her breadcrumbs to try to get the people she needed to get to. So in the long run, who's going to be hurt more from this? Is technically Terrence a whistleblower? Would you like him as a friend? Would you like him as an attorney? In the long run, it seems like he was that singing bird and he could wind up getting the worst out of everything.
Do you think your friendship with him is over?
I don't know. I haven't seen him since. I don't. One thing that's very important to me is to tell the truth, and so that's hard to get over. Tell the truth. And I feel also like I was sort of put in an uncomfortable position where I'm on essentially national TV being called a liar, by the state, and he's letting that happen. And so that's kind of hard to get over, because my credibility as a lawyer is the most important thing to me. If I'm not sure or I don't, have credible basis for something, I'm not going to open my mouth or I'm not going to allege it. There's a reason I waited so long to file this. I wanted to triple check things. So that's kind of disappointing, but there were a lot of people that said things in this case that were disappointing to me that I'm surprised by. And I think my friendships with them will forever be tarnished.
And that is interesting because if she's worked worked around Fanny, is that gone? She worked around Terrence, is that gone? Worked around Nate, is that gone? Because she is also had to have that people sit in front of her and she has had to grill them. And can friendship come back after that? After the people that you're sitting in front of asking questions was at one point a friend of yours?
Well, that leads me to Nathan Wade and Fannie Willis. Do you believe they lied on the stand?
So before we get to that, we just let you know you are watching yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander, and we are, of course, keeping it real. You have any questions or comments? You can email yours truly. It's parkerman2011@gmail.com, parkerman2011@gmail.com. And if you'd like to leave a voicemail, comment, text me. That telephone number is 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. And we are talking about, of course, the Fannie Willis, Donald Trump, Nathan Wade saga. And so we're talking about the trial. And again, we'll give you a recap of what you need to know. So Fulton County District Attorney, we know her, we love her, we can't get enough of her. Fannie Willis, she's been accused of misusing state and federal funds and also engaging in an improper relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. So they did get her to admit to having a personal relationship with Wade, but said it didn't become romantic until after 2022 due to the case against former President Donald Trump. And that's what they're trying to find out. Was this relationship before or after? So she hired Wade to work on the Trump case and paid him $654,000 in 2022, according to Trump co-defendant Michael Roman. And we're going to talk about Roman because we hear about him, but we really don't know about him. So Trump and his co-defendants, they're looking to not just disqualify Nathan Wade, but also Willis from the case and to have all charges centered around the state's anti-racketeering RICO law dismissed. So the defense, this is interesting, has presented a lot of information. We talked about the cell phone placements. We talked about the hugging and the kissing from one of Fannie Willis's ex-best friends, Robert Urey. And so the judge, after hearing all this, he ruled that Willis can stay on and prosecute the Georgia case only if she gets rid of Wade. If she doesn't get rid of Wade, then they all have to leave. So Wade decided to resign, and Willis accepted his resignation. Wow. And so now we have actually making the news rounds talking about, well, this is what has been happening in this case for what I can tell you. So that part is pretty interesting because we're learning a lot of what's happening in this case, and pretty much, you know, we're learning it through her eyes. So she recently appeared on the Megyn Kelly show, and we're talking about this now.
Yes, I definitely believe they lied on the stand. And
Yeah,
I think
about
there's
a material fact.
Right. I think about a material fact. I think they had motivation. I mean, Nathan's testimony was just, I know it wasn't as salacious, but it was incredible. You know,
Literally.
the long pauses. It was literally incredible. The long pauses. And, you know, I went back and I reviewed it, and a lot of it was he would not answer the question. And so I would ask again, and he still wouldn't answer the question. He was very vague. And I, you know, reading it, I'm like, oh, well, he's trying to make sure he doesn't lie on the stand. So, you know, I'm not sure if he lied or just avoided the question, but there was a lot of avoiding the question. And then I'd have to ask it a third time, and they would argue asked and answered, and I would get, you know, that would be sustained, and I'd have to move on. So there's a lot of questions that I actually didn't get an answer to. And that, to me,
I remember
that's very,
this. It was very frustrating. Do you feel the judge was protecting them?
You know, it's one of those things where you're in it, you just get frustrated because how many times you're going to ask the same question and they're not going to give an answer. So, you know, I was frustrated. I don't think I got an answer, but I don't think I was going to get an answer. And I think that's why the judge said, you need to move along, you know?
And I think if you watch the hearings, that she did look frustrated when she kept asking Nathan Wade questions and he wouldn't answer it. And it did look like he was evading certain questions. And it looked like the judge was in their favor.
No, because when you ask something 3 times and they keep deflecting, you're clearly not going to get an answer. I think we would have been there for hours trying to nail down those answers.
But these were material questions and material matters that go right to the heart of disqualification. I can't believe that he let them get away with it. And my only thought at the time was, he knows. Like, he knows what the truth is. So he's not really letting them get away with it. This isn't a jury trial. The judge gets to make the decisions. And yet in the end, he seemed to run cover for them. I mean, look, I think he's a good judge. I like the guy, but I completely think he protected his own hide in this decision. He wants to remain a judge, and he was afraid, this is my judgment, of ticking off the voters in Fulton County. And so he found a way he could telegraph to all of us that he does know. He knows they lied. He knows this all is corrupt. And yet he gets to stay on the bench, and he wants this to be the problem of these 5 other entities. And I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. That's one of the questions I want to ask you. But before I get to that, let's talk about Nathan Wade's resignation, because, you know, you're saying you believe he lied on the stand. I do too. And Fannie Willis too. And so after the judge's order, one of them was forced to step down. And to no one's surprise, it was Nathan Wade. I wasn't surprised, at least.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised either, but she didn't fire him. He gave a resignation.
She made him leave instead of herself. And he says in his letter, in part, okay, as directed by the order today, I hereby offer my resignation effective immediately. Although the court found that the defendants failed to meet their burden of proving that the district attorney acquired an actual conflict of interest, I am offering my resignation in the interest of democracy, in dedication to the American public, and to move this case forward as quickly as possible. Amazing.
Really, he knows that he did what he did. So he's trying to make himself look good and said, hey, you know what, in spite of everything, you guys couldn't find any guilt. But since the ruling is ruling, I'm going to resign so you guys can continue this case.
Amazing to me, Ashley. he makes it sound like this is just, they won, but he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart. It's another lie. He's forced off. He or she were forced off this case. It is not, quote, in the interests of democracy. It's pursuant to court order.
I know. And it goes along with this theme that you saw when they were testifying on the stand, particularly Ms. Willis, about, my client's interests are contrary to democracy. These are extrajudicial statements that are prejudicial. Your interests and mine they're not in controversy. We all want justice. And so him saying that it's contrary to democracy is just yet another dig against my client's right to a fair trial.
Yeah. And once again, a failure to acknowledge it was his own behavior that led to this decision. No responsibility has been taken whatsoever at all. I mean, even to this moment, he was forced off, and he doesn't even issue an apology for his terrible behavior or acknowledge the criticisms of the judge that he just outlined in that long, tweet that I reread that after I posted it. Nothing. Can you believe there's absolutely no responsibility taken by these two?
I mean, there still isn't. And it's shocking because the testimony didn't take any responsibility. All it did was try to flip it back on, you're the bad person, you're the liar. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait, you've hid this. You've gone to great lengths to hide this from the public and from the court and from the county and from the taxpayers. You lied on your campaign disclosures or your financial disclosures. There's county disclosures that say any gift over $100, and it doesn't say it has to be like an actual money transaction. It can be something for a benefit, going on vacation, going out to dinner, getting a ride, whatever. You have to disclose it. You didn't disclose it. You clearly hid this. You didn't go to the county attorney. You didn't go to the board of county commissioners and say, hey, I'm going to pay him, $1 million. And I just want you guys to be okay with that. Or I want to let you know. Didn't do any of that. You're hiding it. You're hiding it because it's wrong. And then you turn around and say that I'm the liar when you've admitted to 90% of what I've said. So clearly I'm not the liar here. I just think it's just deflection, not taking personal responsibility. It's very upsetting. It's very unfortunate. I think the public deserves better. The taxpayers in Fulton County deserve better. I mean, this is taxpayer money. This is not their money. And, lawyers don't get to bill like this. This is not something that's normal. Normally we have a client that would say, hey, this bill is ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah,
I lived that life too. I practiced for 10 years. Every phone call, it has to be down to the second. You don't bill for 10 minutes if the phone call was 6. Otherwise, somebody, usually in my law firm, would come back to me and say, hey, make sure we don't round up. We got to be really super careful. But as you pointed out of the hearing, she was rubber stamping every one of his submissions. Another fact the judge ignored in his ruling.
Right. And it is a lot of money. They argued, oh, well, he made more money in another county. This is a lot of money for a public official to be paid on a case where there's arguably no need. And so, I think it's also important to understand how rare this is. This does not happen. DAs regularly, if they need outside help, they get it from this organization called PAC, which is Georgia's Prosecuting Attorneys Council. They have staff attorneys that are there to help if you need help. That are paid government salaries. Paying an outside prosecutor doesn't make sense, and it's not typical.
So she outsourced this where she could have done it, meaning Fannie, in office. And if she wouldn't have gotten Nathan, then who would she have gotten? Because she did one person. He declined. He said he didn't want to do it. And her next person was Nathan. Was it Nathan because he was close to her, or was it Nathan because she thought he could do it? Or was she pressed to get somebody, so she got Nathan to be the special prosecutor?
The Attorney General's office does it in civil cases, but that is very specialized, and that's for very specialized types of law, healthcare law, things that are specialized in the Attorney General doesn't have actual staff that can handle. But a prosecuting counsel like this, they don't ever hire outside lawyers and pay them hourly. He was essentially working full-time for the DA's office, but he was able to have an outside practice, which, if you were an employee of the DA, you wouldn't be able to have. He couldn't be an employee of the DA because of their relationship. So, she couldn't have hired him as an actual employee. She had to hire him under this contract basis because they couldn't have an affair if he was an employee. So, they're doing all of this stuff to circumvent the law. And then when they get caught, their answer is to claim that, I'm racist and a liar. It's incredible to me.
And sometimes she talks, Ashley, and you seem, if you're like me, that it seems to be a little bit personal because she's kind of emotional too. So it looks like she is hurt by the accusations, her being called a liar, people saying she's not doing her job. And when the people that are saying this are people she's associated with over the years, I guess it hurts her. But if you look at her and Terrence, bam. As soon as she found out he acted like he didn't know anything, she's like, okay, we're not friends. We're on a stand. I'm going to get the truth out of you. So she's one where you have Terrence where, which one would you rather have as a friend? Would you rather have Terrence as a friend because he will tell everybody your business? Or would you rather have Ashley as a friend? Because she will tell your business too. But is she doing that because she's trying to save face, or is she doing that because it's the law? And I think which one gets hurt the most personally? Is it Ashley or is it Terrence?
And right, exactly. And a liar. That's what she said as soon as she took the stand, going after you as having absolutely no foundation for even bringing this motion. And then we, of course, saw the Terrence Bradley text, which told a very different story, and heard from Robin Yurti and saw the cell phone records and so on. On the subject of Nathan Wade, so he goes on in this letter saying, seeking justice for the people of Georgia and the United States and being part of the effort to ensure that the rule of law and democracy are preserved has been the honor of a lifetime. I mean, I have to tell you, Nathan Wade, making sure that the rule of law has been upheld doesn't sit right with me. Not a lawyer who clearly lied under oath in his interrogatories and then in that affidavit submitted in your case, and then on the stand. I got him for at least 3 times committing perjury, which our audience knows at this point, Ashley, you can't do as a civilian, but you really can't do as an officer of the court. It's a double sin, and it happens to be a crime. And as for the first lie, answering the interrogatories, that's not Megyn Kelly's opinion or Ashley Merchant's opinion. That's a fact. He lied in his divorce interrogatories. So what could happen to him now? Because that's one lie we know for sure he told under oath. So what?
An interesting thing too about him as a person, a human being, go back and look up the case where the one TV station was investigating the people killed in the prison, and he was supposed to have been researching on this. And when they asked him, the TV station, well, what information did you get out of the 5 months? He's like, I got it all here. Well, you don't write any papers? He's like, no, all the papers I had, I destroyed. Okay, but give us what you've learned. And he didn't give them what he learned as far as investigating this case. But he told them, I have all information up here. And we never really learned what the information was. But this is Nathan Wade. And then, of course, him and the wife in the divorce proceedings. So even if you take him out of this case, look at some of the other things that he's done that don't even involve this case. Your character stands out.
What happens now? Nothing?
Unfortunately, I think practically probably nothing, but there are lots of people that are investigating. I know that, the judge put in his order several different organizations. The state bar, a lot of people are like, oh, is the state bar going to do something? The thing that I think is unique about the state bar is they only act if someone files a complaint and follows through on the complaint. So they don't do their own independent work early on in a case. If it goes to a trial, which is way later on a case, then they would do some independent work, but they don't investigate. That's not their job. They just review things that are filed. So, someone else would have to do all the work for them to actually pursue it. And that's unlikely. Most people don't do that. The other bodies that could investigate, they don't have a whole lot of power over Nathan Wade. So, the Attorney General in Georgia could investigate. That would be wonderful if they would decide to investigate, because this is public money. I think that the taxpayers probably want to know why so much money was spent on someone who could just send a resignation letter And now the case can move on and it can go forward with publicly funded prosecutors who actually take a salary. There was never an answer to why you needed outside counsel for this. And that's, if I was a taxpayer, that's what I would want to know. Why did you need Nathan Wade? Why could you not hire someone to be a Fulton County government employee and make, $150,000 a year, which is what most of the prosecutors on this case make?
Wow. So 150,000 a year compared to the 600 and something thousand that he got paid. But did they ask, well, why are you using outside counsel? And why are you paying that much? So whose fault is that? He pretty much, now that he's off the case, $650,000, and he gets to continue his life. But nobody is held accountable why he got paid so much.
Why do you need to hire someone else and, pay them these exorbitant amounts?
Because she really wanted to see the world. She wanted to go to Aruba. She wanted to go to Napa. And I mean, hey, I'm in the Caribbean now. I highly recommend it. I'm sure she really loved her trips here. Except unlike Fanny, I paid for it with my own money.
Yeah. And wanted to work with her boyfriend. It's like, I work with my husband, but I'm in private practice. I love working with my husband, but we are in private practice. If you want to work with your loved one, you can't do it in public practice. Like, you just can't do it when you work for the government. There's rules against that.
There are ethical rules against it. She goes on to respond to his resignation letter saying, okay, I accept it, effective immediately. I compliment you for the professionalism and dignity you have shown over the last 865 days as you have endured threats against you and your family, as well as unjustified attacks in the media and in court on your reputation as a lawyer. I think it's another veiled reference to you, Ashley. What do you make of Fannie Willis and to some extent Nathan Wade here actually playing the victim of this unfair witch hunt?
Oh, please. Okay, so she put together that letter. We thank you, Nathan, for being pretty much a responsible attorney who's taken some hits over this situation as far as trying to go after Trump. But even if you like or you don't like these two, Nathan and Fannie, they've done some shady, kind of questionable stuff. Whether it's in this case or whether it's, like I said, in other cases or situations of their life, they're being applauded by the Black community. And is it sometimes because Black people tend to always want to save Black people and not look at, well, you know what, dude? You did wrong. Make them accountable. Yeah, you can have role models, but even role models screw up. And when they screw up, they have to be held accountable. So is it because that, Black people sometimes don't get in these situations, that when they do get in situations of power, that they may feel society is trying to bring them down? If you are doing something bad, whether you're Black or white, then you should be brought down, no matter what color, creed, or race. So with this, just think of this as two white people. Are they being persecuted? So on their way out, they're like, you know what, here's my resignation letter. I thank you. But, for you guys to get back on that case, I'm going to get out. Well, you know what? This case wouldn't have been investigated if they wouldn't have seen some shady things. And then with the acceptance of the letter, oh, you know what, Mr. Wade, we really thank you for being a part. Democracy will prevail. Well, you know what? If you weren't connected with this person who's had some shady things, and you too, then we wouldn't be doing this thing right now, today.
Oh, well, that was what they played the entire time. They played the victim the entire time and tried to make me out to be the villain, which is disingenuous. If they wanted to try to prove these allegations were false, they had the mechanisms to do that. They have all the power.
Produce the text.
Produce their phones. We couldn't subpoena her phone data because she's got some government, control over all of her phone data. Give us the data. Put it under seal. If you want, it doesn't have to go out to the public. Put it under seal. So, it's just unfortunate that they had the ability to disprove all of these allegations, but instead pulled the race card, pulled the victim card, all of those things.
That's right. They didn't, for a reason. Honestly, it's like, I'm sure you and Steve Sadow, attorney for Trump, text often. You've got co-defendants in a big case. If somebody alleged you were having an improper affair, you would just produce all those text messages. Have a look.
100%.
Go ahead. Yeah, I
Just
know.
like
And
I did
they've
here.
always had the ability, even to just have them reviewed in camera. Even if you don't want them to go out to the world, you could produce them in camera. They refused. And there's a question about whether there's any way we can still get those. I'll pick that up when we come back from a quick break. Don't go away. Ashley Merchant stays with us.
So what is interesting? They had the phone records, excuse me, and they could have produced the phone records. We would have had a chance to look at these phone records, but unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to do that. You're watching. Yours truly. Keeping it simple. That's what we try to do. Try to keep it real. We try to keep it honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker. And we are talking about this Nathan Wade, Fani Willis, Donald Trump case. Should Fani be disqualified from this case too? And that's what we're talking about. Let me know what you think about this. If you think that when you look at it, this case should be thrown out, period. We're going to talk about Michael Rowan. We're going to talk about him. We're going to tell you who he is, what he's about. And we got this from the Megyn Kelly Show.
If we could see the substance of those text messages that you guys know happened, you had the number, the frequency, thanks to Nathan's records, but you didn't have the actual content. And I can't help but think they're deleting right now like mad because there's no pending proceeding exactly. Although there is an appeal filed, so I'm not sure if they could delete at the moment. But if you could see them, that would put to bed this thing once and for all. Who could get them? The Attorney General? If he opens up in a criminal investigation, what about the state Senate, which we watched you testify in front of? Do they have subpoena power where they could subpoena the actual text messages so that we could see if we have a perjuring felon as the DA of Fulton County?
So I think just in case these texts were deleted, I think a search warrant would be the safest bet. I mean, some people could get them with a subpoena, but a search warrant is how they get them against my client. I mean, I'm a defense lawyer, so they get texts against my clients all the time.
So yeah, who says now that if Fani has to go into a room and sit in front of Senate committee members, and they ask for those texts, what if she deleted them? But then again, as we found out, you can produce deleted texts. So remember, this case isn't over as far as Nathan Wade and Fani Willis.
I know exactly how they do it. They subpoena their cell phones or subpoena their records. If you have the phone, the easiest way to do it is to take the cell phone and hook it up to a machine called Celebrate. And they have it in the DA's office. I've got the purchase order for them. They have it at the City of Atlanta Police Department. They use it regularly. I have cases pending right now where they have hooked my client's phone up to a Celebrate machine, and that, it essentially makes a forensic copy of the entire phone. So it makes a copy of all the texts, makes a copy of photos, makes a copy of things like that. You can set parameters. So they could hook it to this machine and say, we want copies of all the texts from this date to this date. So let's say they wanted to just prove that, the relationship didn't start until when they said, March 2021, whatever it is, whatever date they came up with.
22. Yeah.
Right. So get all the text before that. We don't need all your salacious text while you are dating, that you have alleged you're dating. How about we get all the text before that? Hook it up to that machine and give us those texts. What are you hiding? What is it that you don't want people to see? And you can do it under seal. So that's easy. They've got the machine. They've got the equipment. Even if they're deleted, they can hook it right up to that machine.
And that's interesting because they didn't do that throughout the trial. I guess Fani and Nathan didn't give the phones to say, okay, well, you guys said we've known each other and been sleeping around since then. Here's our phone, Texas, videos, everything. Put it to that date, and we'll be able to prove our innocence. But they didn't supply the phones.
A search warrant would get it. So if the AG wanted to investigate, they could do a search warrant for the phones and do the same thing. They have the same equipment, same access. They use it all the time. This is the same type of data that was used in the January 6th prosecutions. Same thing that's being used in the YSL case pending here in Atlanta. Same type of thing that the Attorney General in Georgia is using to prosecute what we call the Cop City protesters. It's another racketeering case that's going on locally. So this is something that's used regularly, and it's easy to do. It doesn't cost any money. Yes, it's an intrusion into privacy, but I can tell you, if someone is telling the world that I did something that I didn't do, I'm going to hook my phone up. And
absolutely,
you can see that in my texts. I was unfortunately didn't know how to do it at first, and I didn't know, quite frankly, I would need to, but I figured it out. I was able to.
You turned over everything. Yeah, no, you turned over everything with Terrence Bradley, and we're under no obligation to do all that. And that showed your sides of the texts as well.
And did she turn over everything concerning Bradley because Bradley just clammed up and made her look bad? So then she said, okay, well, you know what? You're going to make me look bad. I'm going to produce the text and show people that, one, you're hiding something and you're lying and you're making me look bad.
Why wouldn't they? Honestly, somebody said I had an affair and I didn't have the affair, and I was in this kind of a situation where my job and a case and my reputation depended on it. I say, Judge, here you go. You can see my dumbass text with Nathan Wade where we just talked about the legal system or going to the movies as platonic friends. There's only one reason that they wouldn't show the ones from 2021, and we know what it is. So what is the story with the Attorney General? It's a Republican, but Georgia's getting more and more blue. That's why Stacey Abrams still thinks she's governor. So is this person likely to pick up this investigation? Is there, because the left is thrilled. The left is thrilled she lived to fight another day. So there'll be pressure on him not to do it from the considerable blue voters in Georgia.
But what is next with this case now that, Fanny's still on it, but they're trying to get her off of it. So what's the next stage?
Right. It's hard for me to guess on that because I live in this moderate world. I'm kind of in the middle, and I just want justice. I just want due process. I want transparency. So I hope that the Attorney General will, but I don't know, the political outcome of that. I'm not sure if they will investigate it or not. I hope that they will. And I think what
about filing the motion? Because Phil Holloway was on the show on last Friday, and he was saying there's a way for you guys to file a motion before Judge McAfee saying, we believe that 2 officers of the court perjured themselves, committed felonies in your courtroom, and as officers of the court, we're bringing this to your attention. But only if he finds that there is probable cause. I can't remember what the standard was before which he could refer it to the AG. It was a considerable standard, though.
Yes, and I'm still investigating. Some of the subpoenas that I sent for the evidentiary hearing, some of the business records are still coming in. So, we've recently got new records, from another travel agent. And so I'm digesting all of those. Another thing other than the phone records is the credit card statements. Ms. Willis could have given credit card statements. She gave one, which to me says there was only one, one time that she actually paid for travel with a credit card, which, anyone that travels knows you kind of have to have a credit card. You can't really book hotels. You can't do any of that stuff without a credit card. So that's sort of surprising. So if I was being accused of something and I had credit card statements to show that I wasn't on trips with Mr. Wade or that I had paid for things, I would be producing those credit card statements. So I think it's surprising we haven't seen those, but that's something that can be subpoenaed as well. But Ms. Willis has this protection on her. And so whenever we try to subpoena any of her records, all of these red lights go off and everything is shut down. So we only were able to subpoena Mr. Wade's records because of her position. She's got certain protections up. And so when we subpoena the records, they're saying, no, we're not giving you these records.
Well, that's interesting. She has that much power that when the courts are saying, look, we need this, she doesn't have to give it. When we talk about the power of Donald Trump, she's in a position of power where she can stop the investigation from happening, which technically she has.
And so we would have to.
Well, what about the Georgia State Senate? Because they can subpoena Nathan Wade's substantive text messages with her.
Oh, and I hope they do. I hope they subpoena those, and I hope that they subpoena them and question them about all of these. Create a timeline because. I was working with limited ability as a defense lawyer. All I have is the right to subpoena, but they've got much broader power, and mine had to be relevant to my case. So, at the beginning, mine was not relevant to perjury. Mine was relevant to the allegations in my first motion. So now if they've got subpoena power, they can subpoena anything that's relevant to a perjury inquiry, which are the texts, which are the records from the credit cards, things like that, travel records. They can subpoena all that. So I hope that they do. You know, and I know that there's some investigations at the federal level. They've got subpoena power. So if they want to, they can subpoena all of those records. And I think it'll paint a much better picture of what was going on here.
And you know, it's interesting. If people can't go after Fanny, then they technically can go after Nate and get his phone records, texts, all that, because he's not in that position of power as Fanny is. Remember, I am not an attorney. I'm just giving you real life explanation. You're watching Keeping It Simple with yours truly, Anthony Parker. We keep it simple, we keep it honest, and we keep it real. And right now we're trying to keep it simple.
They need to do it. We're going to call Jim Jordan's office this week and find out, because he's been investigating what she's been doing with federal money that we've given to her and whether it's being used properly, not in connection with this case, but in a sort of different lane. But it's related. I mean, do we have a felon running the Fulton County DA, the DA's office? Do we or don't we? I mean, this is what she says. She says she's the greatest DA ever. She's the best thing to ever happen to Fulton County. Here she was at that woman's event. I'll give you another soundbite. Do we have it, Kelly? Well, let's watch.
Okay, and don't really care about this women's event. But you think about this, no matter what, is she a good prosecutor? Is she good? Is she a good DA? No matter all of it, is she one of the best ones that they have had? So you have your warts. You have where, okay, I'm good in that position. But I make mistakes. And through all this, Nathan or her have never claimed that they made a mistake or did something wrong.
Do you think she's the best DA Fulton County's ever seen?
You know, it's all in perspective. That's in perspective. And, you know, she ran against Paul Howard. And, you know, I supported her against Paul Howard, and there were a lot of issues with Paul Howard. So, you know, sometimes elections are the lesser of two evils.
Low bar is what you're saying, at least in the recent past when it comes to the DAs there.
So, yeah, that's interesting. Politics is politics. You have, okay, this person's in office, but he's kind of a crook. This person's trying to get in office, but they're not as much a crook. Which ones do you vote for? Because there's not the total honest person running, the worst of two evils, the best of two evils. When she was running, she said she would make it a better place. She wouldn't have relationships with anybody in her office. Technically, that's true, because Nathan wasn't in her office, and she has made it better. But then, has she made it worse and we don't know? We don't know.
Okay, so what about the appeal? Because I know now you guys have tried to get an immediate appeal of the judge's order refusing to disqualify her. He did not, in his order denying your motion to DQ, give you that permission slip the way he did when he struck 6 counts of her indictment the day or two before. And in that order, he said, I'm going to give you a permission slip if you want to take this up right away. Interlocutory appeal, meaning before there's been a trial, before there's been a final judgment. So you need a permission slip for this too. Do you think you're likely to get it?
If you're over 50, you don't want to use traditional makeup.
And what is also interesting, as we talk about this, there's a COVID situation as far as, and I'm trying to get this to make sense, that Fanny's office was involved in, which was interesting because they wanted her in her office to kind of get some of those cases when everybody was dealing with COVID underway, and there was money involved and everything. And one of the things that she did pretty much resolve this. We may talk about this on the show, but one of the good things is that she's done that. And one thing I'm gonna say too, when people are running for office, and one thing that the public and also the media doesn't give credit, it takes a lot for somebody to run for office. So you think of somebody running for DA, and a strong person. And no matter what, you look at Miss Willis as, you have to give her a lot of credit for running for office and then going after these RICO cases, because she has talked about how her life's been threatened, her family's been threatened and everything, and continuing to do this and bring down people who are involved in racketeering. That's a tough job. So we have to give her credit for doing all that. We have to be proud of her for doing all that and trying to show people, well, you know what? This is wrong. And I want to get rid of the bad people. So you hope that she's continuing to do that.
Right. No, we would definitely, if my client was to get convicted, we would definitely raise it as an appellate issue. But I don't think it'll get that far.
You don't? Why?
I don't think my client will get convicted. I think he's innocent. And I think that the case against him is weak at best.
And remember now, she's not defending Donald Trump. She's defending Michael Roman. Or Roman.
And
Can we talk about that a little? I think most people don't even know who Michael Roman is. I mean, we've studied up a little bit on him because of this case, and he's gotten very interesting.
So he's the one that pretty much said, hey, you know what? There's a conflict of interest. Because he's being charged with Donald Trump and a couple others. And what would have happened if he hadn't have found this out? But how did he find this out about this relationship?
And there have been some on the left who have been trying to malign him. Oh, he's a Democrat. I mean, he's a Republican operative. He engages in dirty tricks for a living. Of course, that's what's really happening here. More dirty tricks against poor Fannie. Explain a little bit about who Michael Roman is and why he's been dragged into this case.
So two things. The first thing is, that you pointed out, a lot of people did speculate that he, was behind all of this. And it's ironic because he wasn't at all. So, that was kind of surprising to hear that. People say, oh, well, he's the one investigating this. And he's not, he has no ties to Georgia. The other thing is his role, just to answer your question, he was the election day campaign chair. So the National Election Day campaign chair. So sort of coordinated efforts around the country on election day. That was his job in the campaign. And so he's more of a logistics person than anything. Works with a lot of the lawyers, the campaign lawyers, funneling, hey, do this, do that, get this here, get this from point A to point B. That's really his job. His job was not, like any of the lawyers, to review anything, to analyze it, to, draft anything. It was really just logistics.
So, I mean, so far we've seen many people take pleas in this Georgia prosecution, from Sidney Powell to Jenna Ellis and others. Is there any chance Michael Roman will take a plea? We
were offered a misdemeanor probation early on, and essentially any misdemeanor he wanted to pick, and rejected that. So I think,
wow,
that's about as good as it can get. So I think it's very unlikely that it'll take a plea. And it doesn't surprise me that the others took a plea, quite frankly. It's a very large expense, and it's very stressful to stand trial. I think most people could not. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if someone said, you're almost retirement age, you can spend your retirement funds paying a lawyer and sitting in a 2-year trial, or you can go see your grandkids. I think most of us would cut our losses and go see our grandkids. Even on principle's sake, the 20-year-old me would probably fight on principle. The 50-year-old me would say, I want to go play with my grandkids and enjoy the money I've amassed, versus paying a lawyer to do a case like this. And you got to understand, RICO cases take forever. So, this case, you could easily be in court for a year. And I think it's completely reasonable that these lawyers didn't want to have to spend all of their money and all of their time fighting a case like this in court. So, pleas are oftentimes cutting your losses. And I think that's what we saw with the pleas that we've had so far.
Well, so now, thanks to this motion, we've delayed this trial by 3 months at least, and her pursuit of Donald Trump and Michael Roman and the others. And is there any chance whatsoever this case now gets tried before the election in November?
So that part is going to be interesting. Do you think that this trial will take place before the election? You think about this. How much, really, do you believe that Donald Trump will become the next president of the United States. Do you really feel that he's going to win these cases? Because, you know, Fani Willis is also like Donald Trump. A lot going on. So Donald Trump's thing, and some people say this, the Democrats, is to push all these trials down the road, is because of the Fani Willis, Nathan Wade saga, where technically he got lucky. It will be pushed down the road because he's got a couple other cases going on and they are getting pushed down the road. The election will be coming up real soon, so it could go where these cases come up right before the election and he's tried. Where this case, they could also dismiss it. For this case, they could try it. He could be found innocent or guilty. And how does this affect him before Election Day? Or if he is elected president and these cases come up after he wins, can he be put out of office? Something to think about. But if he wants to get more time to run, to become president first and then deal with that later, then it's working the way that he wants it to work. Speaking of working, we are working on this show. We thank you, Megyn Kelly, for the footage. We have to give credit to Megyn Kelly. She was the first one that has this information with Ashley Merchant, who is the attorney that is trying the Fani Willis. And do we still say Nathan Wade case? Do these people walk off into the sunset? I don't think so, because as Judge McAfee ruled, he just kind of pushed everything down the road for some of the other legal organizations to go after Fani. Should there be a quiet of the information? Should they silence the people so they don't talk about this? Well, you can't really silence Trump. It seems like you can't really silence Fani. Now, in a perfect world, I would love to see Fani go up against Trump and see who kind of wins on that, because they can go after each other for literally everything. But what a fascinating case it would be. And we would get to see the law done in an interesting way, as we've seen this with the Fani Willis, Nathan Wade case. Have you enjoyed this so far the past couple of months? Let me know. You can email me as parkerman2011@gmail.com, parkerman2011@gmail.com. You can text me. Telephone number is 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. And don't forget to hit the like and share button and subscribe. And also contact me and let me know, hey, we like what you're doing, because it's an evolution. And you've seen us from the beginning. So we try to evolve with technology and do certain things. Because I didn't really keep up with this case till I started seeing some streaming shows doing it. And I've been very fascinated with how it's been done. So I said, okay, let me do some of this too and see how it goes. And I've had a bunch of interesting people on my show. And one of the people that I've had on my show, and why you should continue to watch it, is this person.